Good morning, everybody. My name is Lindsay Rule. I work for UVM Extension, and today we're going to walk through how to use goCrop when you're updating your plan. I'm going to say thank you to Susan for setting up the Zoom for folks and for recording this. So this will be recorded and posted on our YouTube channel for your reference at any time, if that's helpful. You can also reach out to me via email or my work number or my cell number. I know that folks might be working on goCrop at 7 p.m. or 7 a.m. and there's a barrier that you come across and you're ready to work on goCrop and you have a question, feel free to give me a call. Happy to try to help you out at any time. And we also have a whole host of information on nutrient management planning on our website. That's listed below here. Susan, if you have a moment to, if you wouldn't mind posting my contact information in the chat and also that web link when you have a moment, that'd be great. Folks out there. Yeah, so on this website, you can look at past tutorials, past nutrient management planning classes, and there's also access to resources like how to take a soil sample, how to take a manure sample, and also our digging in manual that walks through the nutrient management planning classes, and also sorry, a little notification just came up and broke my train of thought. But the digging in manual goes over the nutrient management planning class material as well in a written form. So today we are going to go over goCrop. There was a new version released last year, so the platform looks a little bit different. We've really tried to streamline things, but just in case, we're going to go through all the pieces of goCrop and how to navigate it. We're going to use the walkthrough steps to update your plan. This is something that's a little bit new, but it'll hopefully streamline your update process and learn some new tips and tricks throughout the program. Now, this tutorial is mainly on how to use goCrop. I will touch on some nutrient planning nuances to help your plan meet the required agricultural practices that the Vermont Agency of Ag has put out. But that said, this is not going to be all encompassing of all the required agricultural practices. So as you're updating your plan, feel free to reach out to a technical assistance provider or technical service provider, and that could be someone from NRCS, NRCD, Extension, or maybe another consultant that you're familiar with. We're always happy to help walk you through updating your plan and also reviewing your final report to make sure that things are in line.
So I got a question.
Yes.
So I'm trying to get it to pull up on the laptop at work, and I'm not. I got to pull up a whole new page to restart it because it changed over. Because I think I had to do that with my phone, but I don't recall.
We'll go over how to log in very soon. And so if that doesn't help you out, let me know. Okay?
Yep.
And, thank you for asking that question. That's one other thing that I wanted to bring up is that at any time, feel free to interrupt and ask questions, either by raising your hand, unmuting your mic, putting something in the chat. That said, once I get into presentation mode, sometimes I can't see everything that is coming through on Zoom. So feel free to interrupt, or if somebody sees somebody's hand has been up for a while, interrupt me, and we'll get it done. A couple of things that are also helpful when you're updating your plan as good reference guides are my very beat up here nutrient recommendations for field crops in Vermont. So this is a helpful resource that would be good to have around when you're updating. And then the other piece that I find really helpful to have around is the NRCS 590 standard as well. And in particular, I believe it's on the third page. It goes over what the Vermont nitrogen leaching index categories are, and also the Vermont phosphorus index categorization and how that could impact your planning. Okay, so with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen to share a different screen. This will be a moment of just my face and nothing else. Okay, so when you first log into goCrop, you're going to type in www.gocrop.com. I would recommend using Chrome as your browser because goCrop is best supported in Chrome. I know there's Mozilla Firefox, Microsoft Edge, maybe some others I don't know about, but goCrop is not as supported in those browsers as much as it is in Chrome. So using Chrome is really going to help you have a easier time using goCrop. So what you'll type in the search bar is the URL or the web address www.gocrop.com. That's GOCROP.com, and then click enter. And once you get that, you'll see that your web address changes to new.gocrop.com. That's fine. That's where you want to be. Since you already have a plan, you're going to click log in the upper right. Once you do that, you're going to type in your email login and your password. If you can't remember your email login or your password, there are these two buttons down below that will help you go through steps to update your password or your email. If you get a button or a pop-up that says you need to confirm your email, this is also where you will do that. And goCrop will walk you through those steps by sending an email to the email address that you enter and have steps to confirm your email there. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen, go to a different screen. I am using an account that has multiple farms on it, and it takes a little bit of time to load all of them. So I just set this up to show you how to log in. So once you log in, you'll see a screen like this. You will not have this many farms. I've just been in goCrop for a long time and created a bunch of different farms to try out different things at different times. So you'll probably just see one farm name up here. But before we get into that, what I would like to talk about too is that on the left, we have these three buttons in the green sidebar menu. All farms, account, and then this notification that tells us the last time that goCrop synced with the cloud. The last time your data that you entered into goCrop was connected to the cloud and saved. Before we get into all farms, I do want to just go over what's in account. This may be a new layout for you if you haven't been in goCrop in a little bit of time. Maybe this looks a little unfamiliar. So in account, there are 4 sub-tabs. We have our account information where we can access our passwords, change our account email, you can log out. I have different permissions, so I have admin tools. You won't see that. But basically, this is the area where you're able to change your password or your email address that you use to log in. There's also some profile information, which you probably already have filled in. If you don't, it'd be great if you took a moment to fill in this information. And then in the Farms tab, a list of your farms. Again, you'll probably only see one, but in this list, you'll see your farm name, the role that you have, which is probably owner, and the status, irrevocable. That was probably not said correctly, but I think you get the idea here. And in the last tab, we have some information on our data. And basically, this provides a link to our privacy policy and another form of contact if you want to get help with goCrop through email or phone. One thing I did not mention is that in our sidebar menu, we know which topic we're on because it's highlighted in dark green. So I'm in account, it's all dark green. I'm going to go to all farms and I'm going to choose the farm I want to work with. And that's going to be today, sample farm 2.0. So now that I've chosen my farm, I can see that I've got 3 new tabs: planning, records, and farm assets. We're going to be spending most of our time in planning and records to update our plan. And We're not going to spend too much time in farm assets, but I will touch on that a little bit later. So when you click on your farm, it defaults to planning. But today I'd like us to start actually in, we'll stick with planning for a moment, and then we'll come back to records. We can see that we've got a list of all of our plans. In this particular account, I did really well updating from 2015 to 2018. And then I had some lag time, and now I'm in 2023, and it's 2026. It's time to start my plan. You'll see the last time I updated my plans, and then you'll see that 3 of them have been locked. Last year, when goCrop switched over to this new version, all plans were locked on May 1st, I believe that it was. You can always unlock a plan if you need to change something from that year, but generally these plans are locked to keep that data as you entered it in your locked plan. One thing I'll mention is that once you click into your plan, I'll go into 2023 annual plan before we start our new plan, is that the lock plan feature is grayed out. It is grayed out because it's not a feature that's available anymore. You can always unlock a plan, but right now we do not have the option to lock a plan, which again basically means that it's one step as a barrier to changing what's in that plan. And part of the reason why we created this is because we noticed that sometimes folks would be in a previous plan updating it for the current year when really they needed to start a new plan. So this is one way we tried to kind of mitigate that potential error. I'm going to go back to my planning by clicking on my planning button here, and we're going to start a new plan. So what you'll see right here when we start our new plan is that we're going to have our plan year, which defaults to the current year, 2026. So we're going to keep it there. And then we have this note section. So if there's anything that you want to put in here as a note to yourself, that's a place for it. But it doesn't print anywhere. So it doesn't show up in any of the reports. Our next option we have is where do you want to start? And we have this from scratch. So that means you're going to re-enter all of your data. And chances are you don't want to do that. So if we click this, we have this option to base our 2026 plan on our 2023 annual plan, which basically means that it will copy over all of your field information, not necessarily your planned applications and nutrient balancing, but it'll copy over all your fields, your field boundaries if you outline them, your soil type information, your equipment, and also your nutrient source. So we're going to click 2023 annual plan. Yours might be 2025. So whatever the most recent plan is that you want to copy over and use as a basis for your 2026 plan. We now also have this show advanced section. By and large, I would say ignore this. This was one way that we included more transparency and flexibility in folks' accounts. And here are some ways that we did that. You can create a custom label for your plan, right? This right now defaults to 2026 annual plan, but maybe you want to name it something else. I would discourage that for the moment. If you're updating and it's been a moment, just want to let you know it's there. There's also this custom plan date, which means that you have the ability to change the date that's printed on your report. Currently, what's printed on your report is the last time your plan was updated. Again, I wouldn't worry too much about that. And we also see Vermont NMP reports as something that is included in your plan. Keep this checked. We definitely want reports here. And then we have these nutrient management options. And we can say that we want to include crop removal and nutrient balances, include grazing manure and report, or specify a year's plan for nutrient management options. And we do want to include crop removal in our nutrient balances. This is helpful for us when we're looking at what our planned applications are against soil test recommendations and also crop removal. We'll touch on that a little bit later. But then we can also choose if we want to include to copy over our planned applications from a plan into our current nutrient management plan. So if you had planned in 2023 to apply 6,000 gallons of manure on field 1, we could then say, okay, in 2026, we want to copy all of those planned applications over into our 2026 plan. My 2023 plan, it's been a minute since I've been in goCrop, and I don't want to muddy up what I plan to do with what I have done, because I don't think they're going to be quite the same. My manure analysis might be a little bit different. My fertilizers I use might be a little bit different. So for me this year, I'm just going to leave that blank, and I'm going to kind of start from scratch in my copying over my planned applications from one of my previous plans. But maybe you're pretty consistent. Maybe what you plan to do in 2025 is the same thing you plan to do in 2026. If that's the case, then you could choose this. But for me, for now, I'm going to click save, and then we'll see that we've started my 2026 annual plan. On the left, you can kind of see this plan checklist. I have some things already finished and a few things not, and that's because they weren't finished in my 2023 plan either. So we'll get to those today as we're going through the update. But before we get into planning, like going through all of our other nutrient management checklist steps, I want to actually go and enter in records, because when we're doing nutrient balancing, having those records in is going to be really helpful. So this is a really good place to start, and it's also a really wonderful place to start to help refamiliarize yourself with how goCrop works. So we'll go to records, and we can see I've got a harvest record from 2025. And if you've got your manure records and your fertilizer application records and your harvest wet records and your weather records and your tillage records, you can enter all of those into goCrop. But the ones that are a base minimum to meet required agricultural practices into goCrop is the manure applications and any fertilizers that contain, any organic amendment fertilizers that contain nitrogen. So these two nutrient sources, when they're applied in 1 year, have nitrogen that carries over from year to year. So those must be entered into goCrop to be accounted for in the nutrient balancing. You do need to keep fertilizer records, harvest records, weather records, and there may be some others, but those do not need to be kept in goCrop in order to meet the required agricultural practices. You absolutely do need to keep those records, but they do not need to be entered into goCrop. But they can if you want to have all of your records entered into one place, electronically, digitally, available online. But let's go over how to enter a few records from the record section. In particular, we'll look at the manure application record. So just to back up, right, I'm in records tab, it's dark green. And then to add a new record, I'm going to press the plus new record button in the upper right-hand corner. This is a layout you'll see a lot, where anytime you want to add a new thing, it's in the upper right-hand corner. And the thing that I'd like to add today is a manure application. And my form, right, so I went to add new record, I had this drop-down menu, I chose manure application from this long list. And then we're going to fill out the form. And we'll choose our location, which is whatever our field was. And it says I don't have any crop plans because I am in the 2026 and I haven't made a plan. So I'm going to go back to 2025 and choose the date that I applied manure. I'm going to choose my manure source, and I'm going to choose recorded as. You can choose rate, total, or loads. If you choose rate, you'll enter it in gallons. If it's a solid manure, it will be in tons per acre. If you choose total, again, it's a total, so just backing up, rate is in gallons per acre, totals across the entire field, and goCrop will do the math for you of what it is per acre. And then there's loads. And if you choose loads, then you choose a spreader and you indicate how many loads went onto the field. So in this example, I'm going to use rate, 6,000 gallons per acre, and then we choose the application conditions. And so for that, that's going to be incorporation method, whether it was injected, moldboard, chisel, disc, or not incorporated. If you choose inject, the time to incorporation defaults to immediate. But if you choose any of the other, well, these other three, moldboard, chisel, or disc, then you choose a time to incorporation, whether that's in hours or days. And then you can override it as immediate, but you can override that to put a numerical value in there. And if you choose not incorporated, that just all goes away because there's no time to incorporation there. And then you'll choose the soil moisture, and you'll click the form, look at the drop down, and you've got a number of options. goCrop defaults to moist, but you can choose any of the others that are most applicable. Once you have your record filled out, you can click save. So you can continue doing that for all your manure records. If you want to do your fertilizer records and your weather records, you can do that individually by continually going to plus new record, plus new record, plus new record. But there's also this new feature in goCrop where you can copy a record, and that can be really helpful if, for example, on the same day, you are applying the same rate to a bunch of different fields. So maybe on October 1st, I went to my backfield at 6,000 gallons per acre, but I also went to a few other fields. And so to copy this record and save a few clicks, I'm going to click this select item button in the left-hand side. And now we can see that we have a few more options here. I can edit it, I can duplicate it, or I can delete it. And for me right now, I'm going to show you we're going to duplicate it. So to do that, I'm going to press duplicate, and it tells me I'm in duplicate records at the top, and it copied all my information over. And for me today, the only thing I want to change in this, because everything else is the same, is the field that I went to. I'm say, oh, that was also my front field. So I'll click that and I'll save it. And now that I saved it, it shows in my record. One thing to be conscious of is once you click something in goCrop, that check mark stays there. And when you're moving from place to place in goCrop, it's always best practice to uncheck that item. Now, let's say I look at this and I say, oh, well, most of it was 6,000 gallons, but actually on my backfield, I only put 5,500, and I want to edit that. You notice that when I click this, these three options showed up, but I can also just click on this row and it will open up the form. And once it opens up the form, it shows me all of my information there, and I can go to my edit record from there if I want, and then make any of those changes. Once I make those changes, the button here will go to save, where I can discard the changes. And if I've made a record and I didn't mean to, I can always delete it or trash it by pressing the trash bin icon. And we'll see this in a bunch of different forms and fields, so just be aware that that's there. So I'm going to click save for that. Now to get back to my records list, right, I can click records, but I also have a list of all my records here, right? So if I click I have these three records here for 2025. If I click on records again, it brings me back to that longer list where I can see everything. So just again, right, when I'm in records for the first time, I see a list of my records. And then when I click on a record, I can see some more information, and then that list kind of shortens and it goes to the left-hand side, and I can click on these to bounce between records. The other thing I want to touch on in records, and we'll see this a lot in other places, is this filtering option up here. So when you get to anywhere in goCrop, it'll show you what it's showing. And so I'm in records, so it's showing me all my records for 2025. But if I wanted to filter by a particular type of record that I've already entered, there are three different ways to do that. There's this filter option with different categories. You can search by any search term you can think of, whether that's harvest or corn grain. It'll filter for you by that automatically, and it shows you what it's filtering for at the top. But anytime I don't want to see what it's filtering for, I can X that out. There's also this button of sorting by numerical value or by date. And if we have there's a default, but you can do type, date, or date updated, date added, and then ascending or descending. I waited to show you the filter controls because it's a little bit more of the I wouldn't say complicated, it's actually one of the most useful controls. So I thought I'd save it for last in describing the filter controls. And this is really nice because you can filter your records or whatever other page you're on in goCrop by if it's complete, what type it is. So in records, right now we have harvest record, manure application record, but if we added a fertilizer application record, that would show up here too. We can also look at the years of each of our records. If we want to filter by that option, if we want to see just the records for a particular location, you can see as I click, it automatically filters on the left. And then to get out of this, you can also filter by nutrient source and spreader. But to get out of this, there's 3 different options. You can just click anywhere in the screen, you can click the X, and you can click done on the bottom right. So I am going to add a few more records here just to show you a little bit more about how that's done. And to do that, I'm going to go plus new record again. Another really common record you might add is the fertilizer application. And it looks very much like the manure application record as well. It starts with location, so we'll choose which field we have. And if you have more than 4 fields, you'll be able to scroll through them. But in this account, I only have 4, so that's what shows up. You'll choose your record date, just like you did for the manure record. And then the application type. These application types are default types. It's nothing that you've entered, so choose the one that best applies to you. And then you'll choose your fertilizer. And these fertilizer options are ones that you would have entered into your plan. So if you look at this and you say, oh, I don't have my fertilizer type listed, then we'll go into planning and enter, and then you'll be able to add your fertilizer application. But for us right now, we have it ready to go. I want to apply urea. And then again, just like in your manure application record, you have the ability to record as rate, total loads with the same options. I'm going to choose rate again at 150 pounds per acre, and again, incorporation method as well. Then you choose in the soil moisture and click save. You'll notice that right now, there is a bug in goCrop. So you saw me, right? I entered all this information in correctly, like filled it all in, and the application type is grayed out. This is a bug we're actively working on fixing and should be released in the next few days or so, but it doesn't impact any other calculations in goCrop. So you can put in your fertilizer applications or you can wait a moment, but just so you know, this is a bug in goCrop right now. The other record I would like to show you how to enter and to get back to the plus record button. Again, I'm going to click on the left record label in the green menu. And then I get back to my new records. And the other thing I want to show you is how to import soil tests. So just a couple caveats before I get into importing soil tests. One is that soil test imports are only possible if you have a spreadsheet from UVM's Agriculture and Environmental Testing Laboratory. So if you sent your soil samples to Dairy One, that's fine. We'll just have to enter each one of those manually. But if you sent them to UVM's Agriculture and Environmental Testing Laboratory, we can import them. We are working on expanding this import function, but this is what we have right now. So to do that, right, I went to the plus new record button. I'm now going to choose soil test import, and then I'm going to choose my file. I'm going to take a moment for my computer to talk to my, or for my browser to talk to my computer. One of the nice things in this update, though, is that if you had to enter in soil tests before or import them, we had to do this whole thing where they come in as an Excel spreadsheet, and then we have to save it as a CSV. We don't need to do that anymore. You can import your soil tests from UVM's AETL just as they come, whether that's CSV or an XLSX file. So if you've received your PDF of your soil test from Dan Needham or Ag Testing from UVM, but there was not a spreadsheet, you can email him and request a spreadsheet, and that will be sent to you, and then you can import them. And I'm also happy to walk anybody else through how to import soil test information. But once you'll get your spreadsheet in an email, and once you get that spreadsheet, save it to a place that makes sense to you so it's easy for you to find it in your computer. So I clicked on the file that I wanted to import into goCrop, and it tells me I've got 6 soil tests there. So that's what I expected. That's what's there. I'm now going to click next step. goCrop now says, okay, I see that we have these field names listed in the spreadsheet, and we now need to match them to the field names in goCrop. And we have this drop-down menu here of what we have in goCrop. You may have different values from your soil test results spreadsheet than you have in goCrop, and you might know which ones go with which. So make the matches that belong together, but you might not see the same values from the spreadsheet also in goCrop. And that might be because somebody else took your soil samples and used FSA tracking field numbers, and goCrop just shows you the field names. But for me in this example, my spreadsheet has back, that's back field. My spreadsheet has front, that's front field. And now I have this new 1 and this new 2 and this new average. And what happened was, in this particular example, was that I had a field that was greater than 20 acres. And so I needed to have 2 soil samples for those. And I also want to use the average of those for whatever my soil test recommendations are based off of. So I have a new field that has 2 soil samples, and then in my spreadsheet, I added another row and I averaged them across. If this isn't quite making sense to you, but this is a circumstance that you have, please feel free to reach out to me. I can walk you through it. But for me right now, what I want to do is import all of my soil tests for my fields that I have, including the raw field data of my new field with my average. And we'll touch on that in a moment too, on how to edit this so it works with goCrop. So I've got new 1, new 2, because I have my 2 soil samples for my new field, plus a new average that I'm adding in right there. And then I have another soil sample for my hill pasture, which in this got labeled field 6. So I've got all those. So below matching my fields, there's also this other show all, and I would ignore that. What this show all does is it shows every single column in your spreadsheet. When you open up your spreadsheet, you'll see it's got like a sample ID, columns for other nutrients like iron and magnesium and manganese, but you don't need those in your soil in goCrop to meet the required agricultural practices. So just ignore them. We don't need to track those to meet the required agricultural practices. So just go with the default here of just matching up the fields. And there's a couple other places when we're entering soil test information that the soil test or even manure test have a lot more information on them than goCrop requires. And when I say goCrop requires, I mean the required agricultural practices require. So goCrop is asking you to put in the information that the required agricultural practices need. So once I've matched up my fields, I can scroll down, again, a bunch of columns that are in that spreadsheet, and then we'll click preview with these settings. And now it says, okay, we've got our soil test date, what field it's associated with, the results, and the nutrients. Now I'm going to submit for my import. And it says it imported successfully, so we'll close this. And you'll see that I don't have them listed here. And for a moment, I'm like, oh, I enter my record. Why aren't they showing? And it's because I have 2025 here, and my soil test records are from 2024. So when I go to my filters, I can't choose 2024 because I don't have that plan created. So, oh wait, we do. Sorry, it's just not in order. It's all the way at the back. So even though we don't have the plan, sorry about that. I'm also learning the new nuances of using goCrop as well. So now that we have records for 2024, it's all the way in the back. It's just not in sequence. So we'll click 2024. I'm going to unclick 2025 so I can just see my 2024 records, and we can see all my soil test information there. I'm getting into the weeds here a little bit, but remember we've got these 4 new fields. And remember that one of them was the average. So what we have to do is go back to our spreadsheet and see which one was the average, which is the 6.2, because my pH here is 6.22. That was one of the soil tests that was taken and analyzed. My pH value here is 6.18, which was another soil test that was taken and analyzed. And then this one's my average because my pH is the average of both of those. And what I want to do is I want to bump up this date for my soil test average, because the goCrop will use the most recent date, and I want to tell goCrop to use the average instead of these other two. And to do that, I'm just going to change the date by 1. Now I'm going to make my sample date 11, and I'm going to say in my notes, this is the average of the 2 soil tests. So we'll save that. And now we've entered in our new soil test information. This is great. So at this point, before we've even gotten into planning, right, we will have entered our records. We'll have entered for manure. Feel free to enter in for fertilizers or weather or any other record you want to, but absolutely definitely past year's records for manure and any of your soil tests. If you're not able to import your soil tests, the way to add them is to, again, click on records, get to the new record button, and then we'll choose from our drop-down menu, soil test, not soil test import, but soil test. And then we have this form to fill out. And you can either look at your spreadsheet or a PDF of whatever soil test you have. Now, I did just say whatever soil test you have, but the required agricultural practices require that your soil tests are analyzed using a modified Morgan extract. So if they were sent to a different lab that doesn't use that, the soil tests do not meet required agricultural practices requirements. So just something to be on the lookout. Make sure that your soil tests are using modified Morgans. So here we are in our soil test, and just like all our other forms, we need to tell goCrop where to put it. So we'll choose the field, we'll choose the sample date. I'm just gonna go right into the sample date here. You can also use the date picker, or you can just type it in. And one of the things that we see on some forms are this little help text. And we can always show what it means, what the information is. So what we want here is the date that the soil sample was taken, not that the date that the soil sample was analyzed. So when you're looking at your report, you might see date received by the lab and dates analyzed. But the date that you want to enter here is the date that the soil sample was taken. You can choose to enter a lab. This is great information. It's a note to have for yourself, but it's not required. And then any other notes about this soil sample, like I put in the last one, and it was an average that I wanted to use for that particular field. And then goCrop defaults to what's required by the required agricultural practices, the RAPs, these 6 soil test results, and then these 6 nutrients. I would recommend when you're updating or entering soil tests, just leave it at these 6. Don't add any. You can if you really want to track them. And but if the more you add, the more it kind of clutters up not only the steps in goCrop, but also your report. And I get the idea of like wanting to like save every little piece of information in a digital form or on goCrop, but really just adding more results or more nutrients doesn't help the program, and it can kind of make things a little bit clunkier. So just keep it to the things that the required agricultural practices need, which is also what is listed here. So you'll look at your soil test result report, and you'll enter in the values that you see there. I think the other thing I would say is that we also default to these units. Please don't change them, keep them as they are. If you are seeing results from your soil test report that don't match the units here, please call me up and we'll talk through a way to figure that out for you so that that goCrop works for you. I'm just putting in some random numbers here to give us an idea. And I click, and then you can add another and keep going if you want, or just click save if it's just one more, or if that's just the one that you're entering. And you'll notice that it's telling me I can't make this change. And the reason why is that this plan has been locked. But if I change this to, let's say, 2024, and let's say August, then I should be able to save that. So this is important, for example, if you're back in planning and you have a plan that's locked, right? We see locked on, and you're entering a record for that locked year. You can't do that because it's locked. You can't edit information, you can't enter records, it's frozen. But if your 2025 plan is locked for some reason, and you want to enter records, you'll need to unlock it. And the way to do that is to click the plan that is locked that you want to manipulate information for, and then click unlock plan. I would only do this if you really need to, if you get that error and you need to enter a record. Otherwise, just leave it locked, because once you unlock the plan, at this moment, you can't lock it back up. All right, so we went through records, and now we're going to go to planning. And we already started our new plan, our 26 annual plan. It's in the current plan. There's a plus button here. We don't need to do that. So we're just, because we already did it, so we're going to click on this row. In the event, and this happens occasionally, sometimes folks might accidentally make two plans for the same year. And it can get really confusing about which plan you actually want to work in. And in the event that that happens, right, a good way to indicate which plan you're working in is to go to your edit settings and then the show advanced, and then actually put a custom label. Like use this 2026 plan or whatever makes sense to you. And now that's what this plan name is called. So when we first go into planning, right, we've got our checklist. It's grayed out because we haven't started it. We have our plan status. It'll tell us if our subscription is active or not. And then we have the plan settings, which we already went over. So now we're at the point where we can actually start our plan. We put in some of our previous year's data. That's going to help us in our nutrient balancing. And we can either press start planning, which is the only time this button is here. But any other time that we come back, we'll see that there's this edit plan button up here. But today, because it's our first time starting this plan, and it's the only time we get to press this button when we're starting a plan, we're going to press this little guy right here. All right, so now that we're here, you'll see that we now have that similar checklist that we just saw on our dashboard, but now it's in a steps fashion. And every step that we're on gets this filled in diamonds, and any step that we haven't been to yet is kind of grayed out and open, not filled in. We're in the getting started, and this is where we just have some basic information of how to navigate goCrop. So like I said, like after we get through getting started, we can jump around steps, but we're not going to do that. We're going to go through it sequentially because that's going to make it the easiest flow. And then we can also use our browser's forward or backwards buttons, just like you would in any website that you use. And then you can always go back to your dashboard to get out of this setting and back to your checklist. So now that I've clicked that, I've started my plan, we can see that some things are done and other things are not. So my narratives and farm info is partially filled in, and that's because I still have some more work to do there. Not everything's filled in, but my nutrient sources are complete. My nutrient analyses need some more work. And then I haven't even started on crop rotations, plant crops, or nutrient balancing. I think one thing that I would mention with this is that goCrop checks for completeness. It doesn't check for accuracy, right? So, you know, if you're entering crops and you really plant hay and corn, but for whatever reason in goCrop you put asparagus for everything, goCrop will still be like, yep, that's done, even though it's not correct. So there's one thing to think about, that these are just letting you know all the information is filled in, it's complete, but it doesn't know how accurate it is. So I guess I just want to comment too here while we're back on the dashboard, our landing page for the plan. We have these two sub-tabs, dashboard, which is basically our plan, and then reports that will be generated based off of our 2026 plan that we're creating. And we'll get to that in a moment. So for this, right, we're going to start in the first step, narratives and farm info. And this is the page that you'll see mostly when you come into planning. And goCrop will default to this plan narrative step. It just bypasses getting started after the first time you go into goCrop. But we can always revisit what getting started looks like, just in case you're curious about some of those hints. All right, so again, we went through these notes, and we've already talked about plan settings in the previous page, but you can also edit your settings here. And then there's this option to switch to the full walkthrough for goCrop, which I would recommend if it's a new plan, or you can switch to the update walkthrough. And we're going to use the update walkthrough because that's going to streamline this process considerably. And then from here, we can either click this continue planning button or the plan narrative. Throughout these steps, we'll see continue planning and the steps on the left to navigate or move on to next step consistently. And you can choose either one. You'll probably see me throughout the tutorial using them interchangeably. We're going to click continue planning, and we get to the plan narrative. Now, since you've already done this, hopefully, because you're updating your plan, what you're going to look at here is just going through each one of these 7 steps to make sure that they match what you are currently doing. All right, so I updated this from 2023, not best practice, should have been 2025, but particularly because it's been a couple of years since I've updated this plan, it's really worth my while to make sure that all of these still match what I'm planning on doing. So one thing that you might notice right away is that my planner details aren't filled out. And part of that is because last year when we updated, we expanded planner detail information. So to access that, well, let me back up just a little bit too before I roll through everything. In the plan narrative section, right, there's these 7 pieces: planner details, the farm narrative, the narrative, tillage, watershed, land, and livestock sections. And we can either open them by clicking on the row or by clicking on the little edit button below all of them. If you don't want to see this checklist, you just want to see the boxes, you can hide it at any time. And then it kind of elevates the boxes up a little bit. So I'm going to close that for now, just so we can have a little bit more space. I'm going to start to update my planner details. And to do that, I click the little button, this little pencil icon, and we'll see here first that it says planner details. And that's because you, as a farmer, you are the planner. You are the one creating this. And you might be working with a technical assistance provider, and they are assisting you. But for this right now, for planner details, you're the planner, so you're going to enter in your information. And then your email information as well. Just throw in some things here.
Hey, Lindsay, when you get a minute, I got a question.
Yeah, what's that?
So when I clicked onto my plan narrative, it shows nothing. It shows blank that it needs to be filled in. Okay. Even though, is that normal?
When you went to your settings, did you tell goCrop to base it on a previous plan or to start from scratch?
I haven't done nothing yet. Okay, that's why. Got it.
Okay. All right, hopefully that solves it.
Yep.
You'll see in a bunch of forms, right, and we saw this in the beginning too, that there's this personal notes. Again, you can type anything in here, but it won't show up on reports. It just shows up in goCrop. And then the planning assistant is going to be the technical assistance provider you're working with. And you might not be working with anybody, and that's okay. You don't have one, but maybe you're working with someone from NRCD or from Extension, and you would put their names here. You saw that like Heather's name was put here, and that might have been something initially, but she signed off maybe on your first NMP, but you might be working with somebody else now. And you'll type their name in. And their organization. I'm just putting some stock phrases in here, and maybe it's me, so maybe I'll choose my name. And this is really helpful because maybe you've been doing nutrient management plans for years, and the person you're working with changes from year to year, and that could be because maybe they moved on to a different position or out of the organization, but this is a really nice trail. If we ever need to update something like a Russell or a map, then we can at least say, oh, it was from this NRCD office or this extension person that helped you. Maybe we can talk with them about what they have saved. So it's a simple update and not a complete redo. So this is just very helpful for you and for anybody else that's working with you in the future. You may be working with more than one planning assistant. If that's the case, then you can feel free to add another, and as many as you'd like, but in general, it could be just one or two people. And if you accidentally click that add other and you don't want to see it there anymore, or you added a planner you didn't mean to, you can always remove the entry with this little X button on the right. So once you've updated that, we'll click save. And now I'm going to show you my checklist because now it says everything's done, everything's complete. But remember, my plan's also old, so it's probably not as accurate as it should be. Things have probably changed a little bit. So you should go through each one of these other sections of farm, manure, tillage, and update that if needed. Maybe tillage hasn't changed, or maybe you've moved on to a no-till system, and that's something that you need to update, both in the drop-down menus and within the narrative. One thing that I think can be really helpful in your farm narrative section, if you don't already have it, is a quick little sentence that says something like, we plan on expanding our herd and land base, or you might say something like, we are not planning on expanding our herd and land base. Basically, the narrative is a quick snapshot of what you're currently doing and what you plan to do. Doesn't need to be in any particular detail. You know, you could say, well, we're interested in looking at manure injector and hay land, or we transition to manure injection in 2023. Anything that you want to put in here. And again, to edit any of these descriptions, you'll press the little pencil button. Chances are you may need to update your farm narrative, maybe your manure narrative, especially if you're importing or exporting manure. That's something that you're going to want to put here. And your tillage information. Chances are your watershed information hasn't changed, and your land will have changed if you've bought any land, sold any land, or leasing new land, or renting land out. You're going to want to update these. Just a note on the land, because this can get a little wonky sometimes for folks. I'm going to open up this section by pressing the little pencil button. Is that the tillable permanent hay and permanent pasture sections are distinct. There's no overlap. So it's either permanent hay or it's permanent pasture or it's tillable. There's no double counting. There's no overlap of tillable and permanent hay. We see this occasionally, so I'm just putting that out there. And the other piece too is that goCrop doesn't total these for you. So that's something you'll have to do. And in fact, this total should match what the field acreage total is from your field inventory report. And I'll show you that in a moment. But part of what I want to talk about here is that if, for example, you manage 400 acres, but only 200 acres of that 400 are in your NMP, that's okay. But that would be a really great thing to put in your narrative. So say we operate 400 acres, only 200 are in the NMP, or whatever way you want to say that. I'm just going to throw that in there for now. And then we've got your livestock. Your livestock categories, maybe ones that you've chosen previously, check that they still make sense to you, that your average number is correct, the maximum number, the live weight, and so on and so forth. To edit livestock, this might look a little different than you remember. Again, we click the pencil button. We can edit any of our information for each of our animal type, right? Animal type starts, we have this, we can see them all in the same form going down, and it's separated by our first animal type is in white background, our second animal type is in light gray background, and then it alternates. So you can make any changes to these that you need to. You can delete them if you need to, and you can add other animal groups as well. And then we'll click save. So take a moment, look at yours, when you're updating, that it describes your farm to the best of your ability. So now that we've done this, we're going to move on to our next step. And again, we can do that by clicking nutrient sources or move on to next step. I'm going to click move on to next step. And now we can see a list of all of my nutrient sources. And remember, you saw I had a bunch of plants from a bunch of years, and I had done some experimentation in the past. So I can see all of them. And the 3 that are checked are the 3 that I used in my 2023 plan. Not much has changed. So I want to keep on with that. If there's a previous one that you see you want to add, you can click it, you can unclick it. And if there's a nutrient source that you have that you don't see, we can add that, and I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. But right now, these are the 3 I want to use, so I'm going to click include these sources. Now, this is the first time we've seen a page layout quite like this, right? Like we saw this in records where we have our list of things and then a description of what they are. So I'm in nutrient sources, so my options are manure or fertilizer, and then what type it is. And then we also have some help text here. We kind of went over this before with new record, new source. It's always in the upper right-hand corner. We can use the filters, and because we're updating, we can mark if they're reviewed or unreviewed. And it says if it's complete or incomplete. If, again, I see one here that I don't want to use, like my urea as a gas, that's not what I want. I'm going to omit that from my plan, and I'm going to add a new source. That's going to be, again, it's going to be urea. I do this all the time. When I go to add a new source, goCrop defaults to manure. And really what I want to do is use it as a fertilizer, right? I'm a nutrient source as a fertilizer. So I need to use my drop-down menu to change it from manure to fertilizer. And now my list is my form is a little bit shorter. And all I need to do is put my fertilizer name and my type. I also have these 2 questions when I'm adding a fertilizer source. And that is if it's an organic amendment that contains nitrogen. So that means that it's an organic amendment that's going to release nitrogen over a few years, right? If you're using something like agritine, that's a short release or slower release nitrogen, it doesn't count because it's on a synthetic material. So it's only if it's an organic amendment that contains nitrogen, or if it's a biosolid. You'll choose that here. Urea is neither. I'm going to click save. And now I've got urea, my dry fertilizer. And I also realized that, I did have starter as a gas, but I don't want that anymore. Either I want a starter that's a liquid. So I'm going to choose a new source. Again, I'm going to go up to manure and change it, or my drop down and change it from manure to fertilizer. And I'll add in, maybe nitan, and this is a liquid. And again, it's synthetic, so I'm not going to choose any of those other pieces. I'll click save. And then we can see, right, I just added these 2. It says they're both new this year, they're both complete. And then the last nutrient source I'll add, again, as a fertilizer, instead of a manure, is an organic amendment. And again, this is going to be, for my example, it's going to be dry. And this time I'm going to click nitrogen containing organic amendment. Could be anything you're familiar with there, but we'll just leave it at that here. And then my big tip, and I do want to open this up just to take a peek at it and maybe make some edits. So here we might see that, I'm not importing, my dairy cow is correct, it's still liquid, but I want to talk a little bit more about this estimated annual total that's generated and the amount that's exported. So let's say that your farm generates about 1 million gallons of manure, but you export 100,000. If that's the case, because of how goCrop uses these numbers, what we'll put here in export is the 100,000, right? Because that's what you're exporting. But the number we're going to put here in estimated annual total is 900,000. So this equals 1 million. But this amount goes towards your manure drawdown, and your export goes somewhere else, as listed in reports. So if this is something that you're doing, we're going to click save, but this is also something that you would want to go back up to your plan narrative in your manure section and say, we generate, or the cows generate about 1 million and 100,000 is exported. If you are exporting manure or if you're importing manure, you should have a manure import-export agreement with whoever that manure is going to or from. If you need a copy of that, please reach out and we can get something to you. So we're in nutrient sources, we edited our big pit, and now it says reviewed because we edited it. And if you need to add more manure sources, you can also click new source, create something, like name it, whatever makes sense to you, and then fill out the form and to the best of your ability. Again, just like in all our other manure or forms, not just our manure form, but all our forms, we have some help text, and you can always open that up by pressing that circle with a question mark. You can also close it by the little circle with an X in it. I'm not actually going to add this nutrient source, so I'm going to click discard. So this looks all good. I completed, I updated, I added, and now I'm going to move on to my next step. So now I'm at nutrient analyses. And this is one of the walkthrough steps that we included to help streamline things. So we can review sources with missing or out of date analyses. We can review all sources, or we can just move on to the next step if we think everything's up to date. For us today, because I want to be pretty thorough, I'm going to click on review sources with missing or out of, or sorry, I'm going to click on review all sources so that we can look at everything all at once. And now we see a page much like we've seen in a bunch of previously and in some other spaces, right? Where we are nutrient analyses, that's the name of the step we've got here. We've got our filter options. We have this help text. You can always close this help text if you don't want to see it by pressing the X. And if you ever want to see it again, you can click the little help icon down here. And you might have seen this in the previous page, but there's also start this step over. And that basically just resets it to the same view that you just saw. But it doesn't change any of your information. So for example, I think just to show what this looks like in nutrient sources, for example, if I start this step over, I get the what to expect. You're not going to delete any of your data. You're just going to get that first page of what it looked like. Click start over, and it brings us back to this. But it kept the nutrients that I had selected before still, which is really great. And we'll just say review nutrient source information, and it brings us to this page. So that's all that start this step button does, and it appears as soon as we remove our help text from view, which we can always get back from this little question mark here. All right, we're going to move on to nutrient analyses. And we've got, all right, our list of nutrients, what they are, some more description, and then if they're due for a test or if they're new this year, which is kind of neat to see that. So once we click on our nutrient, we'll start with the first one and start adding information there. We'll click the big pit. we'll see we do have a couple of tests, and we're going to add a new manure test. It's telling us it's due for one. So you might have a manure analysis that you want to use. If you don't have one, you should get one. They need to have one every year. There should be a new one. And just like when we talked about soil tests, just enter in what goCrop is asking for, because that's what's in line with the required agricultural practices and the 590 standard. One thing you'll see here that goCrop is asking you for inorganic and organic nitrogen. If you're looking at your manure test results, you might see total nitrogen. Don't add that, ignore that. We just need the two different fractions of it as they're reported and not the total. I think the other thing I'd like to add here, right, and I talked about this a little bit in soil tests, that don't, in addition to not adding additional nutrients, don't change the drop-down options for nutrient type or the units. If the units don't match the manure source you're in, so like let's say my manure source is Big Pit, but it's showing instead pounds per wet ton, go back to your nutrient sources and change the units there, and that will change it here. So if you're seeing units here that don't match your manure source, discard the entry and then go back to nutrient sources and change the type of manure that it is so that the units are matching for what your manure test is. So once you enter your manure source analysis, you can click save. And now it's complete. Now I'm done. And instead of going back to our list, right, and we can always go back to our list in any step by clicking this button, which is a little listy icon-y situation. Go back to the list there. We can also scroll through to enter all of our analyses for each one of our nutrient sources. So instead of going to my list, I can just click this little right Pac-Man-y button, and it will take me to my NITAN. And then I'm going to add my fertilizer analysis by clicking up in the upper right-hand corner. And because we have a liquid, we also need to enter a density. goCrop provides a default value. That's probably not correct. So please check with your label, check with the description on your label for what the density is for the fertilizer that you're using, and update that accordingly. It's important so that goCrop can calculate the amount of nutrient added when you're making a planned application or when you're saving a record. So now when I add that, right, I still have this label as new to this year, and now it says it's up to date. You'll also notice that when I enter a fertilizer analysis, it does not ask for a date, and that's because fertilizer should be rather consistent. So if you're getting NITAN at 32% and then you switch to getting at 28%, it might be best to create a new fertilizer source called NITAN 32 and then NITAN 28, and then keep those separate. And then then we have an organic amendment, and I'm just gonna put some numbers in here. All right, we've got our nutrients here and our units over here. Again, keep those as they are. If they don't match what you see, give us a call and we'll help walk through of what that should look like. And remember from my organic amendment, I said, hey, this is an organic amendment. Now I can add in or change what the mineralization rate is. goCrop puts a default in there as 30%. And check with whoever you bought your fertilizer package from of what they would put this at. But this is just to say that when this organic amendment is applied, only 30% of the nitrogen is available within the first year. So that's complete, and now I'm going to move on here, and the last one I have is urea. I know it's the last one because I can't move any further. My little Pac-Man-y thing is grayed out. I'm going to add my last fertilizer analysis. Again, just like in the other forms, we can add nutrients. So maybe you're applying something that has boron or magnesium. If that is a nutrient you want to track, add it in, absolutely. But Also, it's not required necessarily to track it, so it's up to you whether you add that or not. But what that could look like, right, is you add another, you have a drop-down menu of what to choose from, and then you would enter in the value and the unit that corresponds with it. You enter something in and you actually don't want it, you can also just delete it by pressing the red X button. Once you're done, you click save. So now we can see I'm just looking at my little checklist over here. The steps I've been in are outlined in turquoise, and the step I'm on is totally filled in. And now I'm ready to go on to equipment, right? I have that option to move on to my next step, but I also just want to take a look at my list and see that everything's up to date, everything's looking good. So I'm going to move on to my next step. And now, like I just saw with the nutrient sources, I have these options for what spreaders I want to include. For me, I stopped stacking my manure. I only have the liquid pits, so I don't need to include the semi-solid spreader in my plan this year. Again, just like we saw with the nutrient sources, if you want to add one, you'll have the opportunity to do that after going through this step. So I'm going to include these items, one item, my liquid spreader. And now I have the same help text I've been seeing, so I'm going to close that because I don't want to see it. And I can see my liquid spreader. It's unreviewed. I can click on it. I can make any edits that I might need to it. So for example, when my 2023 plan, I didn't have it calibrated, but I met up with someone from NRCD or Extension and I calibrated it. So I'm going to switch that to yes. It is important to have, well, I should say the required agricultural practices require that spreaders are calibrated to meet the standards, to meet the specs. The size should reflect how much it's filled up by. So, you might have a spreader that holds 8,000 gallons, but for whatever reason, you only put 6,000 gallons in there. It's important to put the amount that your spreader is actually holding because goCrop uses that in some reports to help determine what the actual rate is. And then we also have this option if it's custom applied or not. We're going to click save or apply from 2026 onward. And now that we've changed something, right, it still says it's still complete, but it doesn't say that it's been reviewed. And I'm going to mark it as reviewed just to change that over. And now I'm done. And I get back to this list. If you want to add equipment, you can press the little plus button up here on the right. And then let's see what our help text is, but you'll name your spreader whatever it is. You'll choose this type, liquid, semi-solid, or solid. If you choose a liquid, your amount or your units default to gallons. If you choose solid, it defaults to tons. Make sure that whatever you choose, if it's liquid or it's solid, that the amount reflects how you think about it. Semi-solid is a little bit of a funny situation because is it liquid? Is it solid? This defaults it to tons. So I'm trying to think about how to create a equivalent if you're thinking about it in gallons. But then the same questions are asked if it's calibrated or custom applied. I'm not going to save this, so I will click discard, but I think the only other thing I want to point out in the equipment section is that there is a drop-down menu, and the only option to actually enter in for equipment is the spreader. So if you're in new equipment, really the only new equipment you can enter is the spreader. All right, we got greens there, and now we're going to go on to fields. So to do that, I'm going to move on to the next step. I have these 4 fields, and I want to keep all of them. I want all that information. There's not a single one I don't want to include, but maybe you don't want to include one. You can always unclick it, and maybe you've added a new field. So if that is the case, right, we have the same things that we've seen before where we have a list of our fields, the tracking field numbers associated with them, and then if they're reviewed or not. So what we see in our field information, and just to bring that up, I'm going to click on this row, is the name of the field, the tracking field number, the size, and if it's owned, any notes that I might have taken or might have, got a little bit of a refresh there. Any notes that I might have made or goCrop might have made for me, depending on what was put in tracking field numbers before the transition. and then an outline of the field. That's all that is. So if nothing of this has changed in your field from last year, you don't need to review them. And you can just like, you can choose to mark them as reviewed, or you can leave them as unreviewed. Whatever you leave here doesn't impact goCrop anywhere. It's just a helpful device for you if you're like, oh, I think I know that all of the acreage is correct on my backfield, hill field, and new field, but I'm really not sure about my front field. I've got to go look that up. Maybe you're going to leave that one as marked like unreviewed so that you know to go back and change that. I do want to show how to create a new field just in case anybody's added anything. To do that, right, I went to that plus button and I'm in the new field form. And again, right, we've got some of the help text. For your field name, you can either enter in field name you most associate it with or track and field number. Ideally, both. You absolutely have a plan that meets the standards. It needs to have an associated FSA track and field number. And the field name is just really helpful because that might be more what you're used to calling it. If you use the FSA track and field number as a name, you can enter them twice if you want. I did have this instance recently where somebody had added some fields that were never a part of FSA track and field numbering. And if that is your situation, clearly you have nothing to type in here, and that's okay. But I would recommend going into your plan narrative and putting in the farm narrative, okay, I have these 3 fields. They don't have any FSA track and field numbers because they're not a part of that system. Just because if there is an inspector, they might be like, this isn't what I'm expecting, and just having that written out there for them kind of helps ease their understanding of what's going on in your operation. So we're going to name your field, whatever makes sense to you, and that could be, like field behind pit, field next to barn, this side of the brook. It could be an abbreviation of something, but whatever makes the most sense for you, that's what you'll put in this long name. And then you'll put a track and field number. You may have multiple track and field numbers associated with the field, and you can add as many as are connected with that field. And there are some instances where there might be an FSA track and field where they are it's the same field, but it's split up into 2 of your fields. And if that's the case, it can be really helpful to label the FSA track and field number as associated with the direction. So maybe, my newer field has the northern part of track and field number 1023.8, and then one of my other fields might have the southern part. So that can kind of be a nice way to help you and anybody you're working with know which FSA track and field numbers are associated with the field as you know them. All right, so the next section we have to fill out is the number of acres. And I think the only thing that I want to say about this is that you do have the opportunity to map a field, but when you map the field, it just draws the boundaries around it and helps goCrop pull from Surgo, the soil series database, but it doesn't actually calculate any acreage. So whatever you map here doesn't connect to this. You have to manually enter in your own acreage. We'll choose the ownership type, whether owned or leased. And I do want to show you how to map because I think it's really helpful to have as a good reference for you and anybody else who's working with you. And my mapping picture is really small. I want to work in something a little bit bigger. And to do that, I'm going to press this outline of a square that if I hover over it, maybe you can see it says toggle full screen view. That's what I'm going to do. And then to zoom in on an area, I'm going to hold my left mouse button and use my flywheel on my mouse to scroll in. I can also hold my left mouse button and pan around, hold it down and move to center the area I want to be in. I'm going to continue to kind of do that until I find the field I want to work in. I'm going to choose this field. I don't know whose it is. I'm just going for it. And then to outline your field, right, you can see that I kind of have these like cross hairs here, and I'm going to use my left mouse button to drop my first point on the corner of the field I'm going to start at. So I'm going to click once, and once I click, now when I move my mouse, you can see I have this line, and it kind of travels wherever I put my cursor. Good times here. And I'm going to draw the outline of my field by putting points down at each one, or putting dots down at each of my field corners by pressing the left mouse button. So I dropped a point to start by clicking my left mouse button, and I'm going to move my mouse over to the next corner for the next dot to outline, and you kind of go around your field, dropping as many dots to outline your field as you need to. You can see that there are more dots that get added when I make a long line. That's okay. That's just the way this program's working. And then to close my shape, right? If I've got my free, I haven't dropped a dot, I'm just moving it around, but I want to close my shape. To do that, I'm going to hover my mouse over the first dot I dropped. And now you can see that my crosshairs have changed into a hand. That means if I click my left mouse button, it's going to close my boundary, it's going to close my border, and then I'm going to have my shape. And once I do that, goCrop switches back to the form I was just on. If you don't like the shape, if you're on the wrong field, you can trash it and start somewhere else. If you want to change the shape, you can make this large again, but you can also keep it small. And let's say you're like, well, actually, I don't use this portion of the field. You can kind of drag and drop these dots so that they line up with the part of the field that you do use. But again, right, I just made my boundary. This is really great for my land info, but it does not connect to the amount of acres I just entered. All right, so now I'm going to click save. And once I click save, I come back to my field list, and I can see which ones I've reviewed, what I left to come back to, and that this is new this year and it's complete. If I didn't enter, the field acres, for example, it will now it will show up as incomplete. If you have a long list of fields and you only want to see the ones that aren't complete, just to fill those out to get those done, the filter option can be really nice. And so just to show you really quickly, I go to my filter option, say I only want to look at the incomplete ones, I'll close that out, and it's just my newer field. I add that in because I want to complete it. And I'm going to go back to my field list by pressing this list button up here. And now, where have all my fields gone, right? Well, remember I'm filtered by what I included in this year, but I also filtered by incomplete. I no longer have any incomplete fields, so I've got a bunch of hidden items. Instead of clearing all my filters, I'm just going to remove the incomplete, because I still want to keep the ones that are just included in my fields or my plan this year. I don't want to look at any fields that have been a part of past plans, and it brings them all back when I get rid of that filter option for incomplete. All right, we're going to move on to the next step, land info. And again, just like we saw for fields, we can review fields with missing information, we can review all fields, and we can move on to the next step. Because I want to be pretty thorough for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to review all fields. All right, I've got my list of 5 fields. I can see that 4 of them are blank or complete, and the one that I just entered is blank. So I'm going to go check this one out and see what's missing here. And it's my soil type information. So there are a couple of different options for filling in your soil information. I think the easiest one is to fill in based on your map area. But let's say you haven't mapped it. The way that you can fill this in is by choosing your dominant soil type. And let's say that you go to your dominant soil type and you have your soil series fact sheet, you know what soil type is supposed to be here, and none of these codes match. That might be because your farm is across 2 counties, and for whatever reason, every county has their own soil series code. So to get to the code that matches your county, you'll have to change your county. So to do that, you'll choose change county here. choose the county that best describes where you're at. And then you can go back down to choose your dominant soil type, and your codes are different. But for me right now, I'm going to clear the county and I'm just going to fill based on my field map. So this is a dummy account. So I think my own county that I chose in my settings doesn't match this. And just in the interest of time, I'm not going to go back and make this match. But if you do fill based on field map, you won't see dominant. You won't see other as dominant soil type. You'll see one of these listed here. And then once you have your dominant soil type filled in, a bunch of other information gets pulled from the database. We used to have to manually enter all of this, but it automatically generates for you. It's always best practice to double check the soil series fact sheet that these match, but you'll also need to check anyway because you'll need to enter the water table depth and the depth of bedrock. You'll notice when I clicked on water table depth, because I've been in here a bunch, I have what looks like a drop down, but it's not. This is just a bunch of numbers that are auto-populating from things I've already entered. So you probably won't see this. You probably will be just typing yours in. But the depth to bedrock is a drop down. You'll need to look at the soil series fact sheet for that. And then the nitrogen leaching index is not on your soil series fact sheet. You do need to enter this. And if you don't know what it is, please reach out to a technical assistance provider and we can help get that information for you. Your tolerable soil loss also comes from your soil series fact sheet. Now, I just slowed down and emphasized that because it's not uncommon for someone to use their Russell 2 value here. But the value that gets entered here, open up this help text, is a tolerable soil loss from your soil series fact sheet. It is associated with the amount of soil per year that NRCS says that field can lose and still continue productivity into the future. It's an inherent soil property. It has nothing to do with your management practices. It comes from your soil series fact sheet, tolerable soil loss. Typically, I see these as like 3 or 5, but it's not uncommon also if you have a really fragile or susceptible soil that it might be 2 or even 1.5. So look at your soil series fact sheet. And we have these other pieces that go into the P index, elevation and distance to stream. There's some help text further describing what that is. If you added a field that was right next to a field that's already in goCrop and you have the elevation entered there, you can probably just look at that other field and copy that over. But if you don't know what the elevation is or the distance to stream and you want some help, reach out to a technical assistance provider. Again, that's somebody from NRCS, NRCD, or Extension, or whoever is helping you. And for the elevation and distance to stream. So the distance to stream is the closest edge of your field to the closest part of the stream, whatever that distance is. If you're right next to the stream, like literally if your field is on the stream, next to it, not on it, you want to put 25 feet though, because that is the minimum amount required by the agricultural practices to have as a distance between any fertilizer manure application that you're making. So the minimum number here is 25. And then the maximum number can be whatever the amount of distance it is from your edge of field to the stream. If you have questions about this, feel free to reach out and we are happy to help walk through and otherwise talk through all that. Okay, so I saved that. I'm done. I'm going to come back to my fields. I'm not going to come back and look at my soil type or nitrogen leaching index information from what I've copied over from previous years, because that stuff really hasn't changed. It's inherent soil properties. I'm going to move on. They're all complete. But if you are unsure, feel free to open them up, take a look, and keep scrolling through by using these little buttons on the right-hand side to see what was entered. If you have any questions, you want to make sure that it's up to snuff. Right, so we'll go back to our list. We see that's there, and we're going to move on to our next step, which is soil test. And I'm going to review fields due for soil test this year, right? Because I just entered them all. What could I possibly be missing? Oh, it's my newer field. Shoot. Well, I just got this field in the fall. It's after I have my soil test, but if I don't have a soil test entered for this, then I won't have any automatically generated recommendations. If this is something that you're experiencing, what I would recommend is going to your records, looking at your soil test, and choosing the one that might most closely resemble what that new field is. And so for me, I'm going to say that my new field is very similar to my average of my newer field is similar to my new field. And so I'm going to choose the average of that, right? I changed the date on that. And I'm going to click duplicate because I want to duplicate this soil test to my newer field. And I'm going to amend my note here that this is the average of this soil test for new field, and newer field needs a soil sample. So I'm going to save that there so that I have a soil test in there. But then just to button everything up, right, I'm going to uncheck what I just duplicated. And I'm going to go back to my planning. I'm going to choose my 2026 plan I was just in. I'm going to go to my farm, my narratives and farm info. In farm, I'm going to say we added newer field in fall 2025, are currently using new field soil test result average. We'll get new soil samples for newer field in 2026. All right, so this is just if, someone's coming, looking at your plan, like, well, why do these fields that are different have the same exact soil test? You're just being really upfront and really clear of like, what are we going to do? We acquired this, didn't have a soil test for it, but we still need to make a nutrient plan. If you could also say, field average because it has a similar, soil type. It's all similar, correct? And has similar farm practices, or manage the same, whatever terminology you want to use there. So we were just in soil tests, right? And I was missing one. And now I come here and again, like, where are my fields? It's because I put that filter on where I only wanted to look at them, my fields by what was due for test. And I can know that because I see included, I see due for test. I want to see them all. So I'm going to get rid of my filter function. And now I can see all of them. Everything's up to date. Looking good there. So I'm going to move on to my next step. And again, we're seeing the same question that we just saw. We can review all our fields. We can say everything's the same, move on to next, or we can kind of filter by risk management, by fields that don't have the risk management in it. I'm going to review all fields because I think we're just going to see what that looks like. I'm going to see my list here. And again, just like we've seen, we've got our list of our fields, the track and field number, if it's complete or not, and then if we want to mark it as review. My newer field is new this year and it's completely blank. And just to show you what this section looks like, we're going to look at newer field. Here we have a lot of information that has to do with the P index. We have a bunch of different help text here. So the vegetated buffer width is the amount of perennial vegetation from your edge of field to a stream. Now, again, if your field is right on a stream or a waterway, then that minimum vegetated buffer width must be 25 feet. That's the minimum you can have. But you might have 500 feet of riparian forest, or you might have 1,000 feet of just forest between your edge of field and a river, stream, whatever water conveyance to our water bodies. That's the number you can put here. The minimum is 25, but it can be hundreds or thousands of feet. If you have questions about this, reach out to your technical assistance provider and we can help you find out what this number is. The manure spread setback is anything in addition to that vegetated buffer width. Usually that's 0. But, I have worked with a couple of folks who are like, yeah, I've got this hay field, but it's also got this low wet spot that abuts the forest, and we have our 25-foot buffer, but then, we also do have a manure spreading setback. We adhere to that. But for most cases, that's going to be 0. Has living vegetation in April, you're going to mark yes for this if it's, perennial hay, perennial pasture, or if you're going to have a winter surviving good cover crop. And I'm not talking about like, oh, we threw some rye seed down at the beginning of November and it's like scraggly hairs. Like, no, an actually robust, good cover crop counts as a yes. Because what we really want to know is that ground covered with a living vegetation that's going to absorb some of the nutrients? Our next question here is, has pattern tile drainage? And that question really is like pattern tile drainage, meaning like you've got tile every 10, 20, or 30 feet. It's systemic. Not if you've got like tile to drain a low spot or an orphan tile somewhere here and there. It's really pattern tile drainage. So for some folks that's yes, and for some that's no. Frequently flooded, this is based on the math. Reach out to your technical assistance provider if you're not sure about what to choose for your field. And then sediment trap structure, just ignore that because that's a legacy from previous requirements. And then water quality considerations, you can add into this if you don't want to put anything. You can leave it blank. You can type NA, but if you've got a well or any other type of thing that you want to be thinking about or let somebody else to know to think about when they're spreading manure or fertilizer, that's a great place to put here. We'll click save, and now we're finishing our risk management step. I'm going to go back to my field list just to make sure that that's all complete. That all took, it all looks good. And now I'm going to move on to my next step, which is crop rotations. I think before I do that, the only other thing I want to mention is that as you're changing crops, the living cover question might change, right? So maybe last year my backfield was corn and I didn't have a cover crop, so that's going to be no to living vegetation in April. But maybe this coming year, it's going to be hay. And then I would want to choose yes, because that would have, sorry, let me back up. Maybe in 2024, I had corn, and in 2025, I planted hay. And so going into my 2026 plan, I'm going to have a good, well-established hay field. I would want to double check that all my fields accurately are saying if they have living vegetation in April or not. And that can be just a real quick, like, backfield. Yep, it had corn, or got corn in it in 2026, so no, it doesn't have living vegetation. My front field also has corn, or maybe I'm switching it. It has hay in April this year. I would change it to yes. So this might be something you're going to come back to after you establish your crop rotations and crops. But just to let you know, this is a piece that might not be as straightforward as you expect. And I changed a few of those things, but it hasn't changed mark reviewed because that's something that I actually need to press. And I can just click on that to say reviewed or not. I'm going to leave them as unreviewed so that I can, as a reminder, to come back and make sure that living vegetation in April is marked. So now we're going to go on to crop rotations. And similar to what we also saw was that we can start by adding rotations to fields that don't have them, see all fields and add copy or update rotations yourself, or we can move on to the next step. You might also see that's not what I want to say, actually, sorry. So for us, again, we're just going to look at all the fields because I want to double check that things are lining up. Because remember, the last time I updated my plan was in 2023. So now we'll go to the back field, and I don't have rotations chosen for my back field. So I'm going to choose my back field as a corn silage. And because in my backfield, I'm going to grow corn silage continuously, I'm only going to enter it once. And I'll only have one value to put for my Russell 2. So just to back up here for a little bit, right? We're in the row crop rotations, and this is the section where we're going to enter the rotations we plan for this field. And in general, right, you're either going to have like continuous corn, continuous hay, continuous pasture, or a rotation. And I'm going to go through an example of each one of those. So in this example, we're going to do continuous corn with cover crop, and you'll have a Russell 2 value. If you don't have a Russell 2 sheet, reach out to the technical assistance provider, and we'll get you connected with Russell 2s, or if they need to be updated, right? So, you know, at one point in time, you might have said on backfield, I was going to have continuous corn, but things are changing, and I actually want to put that into rotation. So you might need to reach out to the technical assistance provider to update the Russell 2 annual soil loss values for that field. Russell 2 is the revised universal soil loss equation, and it's an estimate of the amount of soil that is leaving that field based on soil type, location, and management practices. So it is something that you would have to talk with a technical assistance provider to get this number within the nearest ballpark that it possibly can. So we're going to enter a complete rotation. I'm going to leave this as it is because, again, we're doing continuous corn. And then we're going to choose the current year in rotation. Because it's continuous corn, I'm going to choose the only option I have. And then I have this question for the entire rotation average soil loss. And so because I only have continuous corn, it's 1.2. That's what it is every single year. I'm going to say that that's the average soil loss for the entire rotation. I'm going to save my rotation and go on to my next field. Click mark reviewed here because I feel pretty good about that. And go on to my next field by using the little caret button here on the right. And now in my front field, I'm going to choose my next crop. And for this example, I'm going to choose continuous hay, right? I'm going to choose from the drop-down menu. There's lots of different options here. Hopefully you see what you're looking for, but in general, I think the top ones I most see people use are corn green, corn silage with cover crop, and then hay and pasture. So for my hay, it's going to be a pretty low annual soil loss. And again, because it's continuous, it's always been hay, it will continue to be hay in the future. I don't have any plans to rotate it. It's going to enter it once. I don't need to enter the same thing 10 times. And then we'll enter a pasture here, get my hill pasture. And again, the Russell 2 annual loss is something that a technical assistance provider can have or help you with. They've added those. And now I have my new field. And for this example, I want to show you what it might look like to add rotations. And let's say it's a 10-year rotation. So every time I choose a crop from the drop-down, a new line appears for me to add more. And one of the other, there is like this general hay up here that we can use, but I like to, in a rotation, I use hay new followed by hay established. Now, the other piece here too is as we scroll down, and this is important, is that if you have a high legume content in your crops, you're going to also want to capture that here. And one of the things that we'll do when we're updating a plan or creating a plan So we might spend some time going back between crops and crop rotations to make sure that whatever we put in crop rotations matches what we have in crops, right? And then we would need to go back to risk management to make sure that that living vegetation matches within crops. So for this example, maybe I'm going to start having a pretty high legume content when I first start, and that's going to continue on. So I'm going to have my grass legume hay new, it's newly seeded. I'm going to keep going with that. And then maybe after like the third year or so, the legume's going to fade out. I'm not going to reseed it. And I already can imagine that I'm going to be too busy. So then I'm going to change over to just hay established. And I'm getting tired of scrolling. So now I'm just going to switch over to hay. That's fine. You can notice that like I've got two scrolls, one here for my drop-down menu, and then I also have this side scroll as well. So I'm going to use that so I can continue to see my full drop-down menu options. So now that I've put in all of the crop years that I want for my rotation, I'm going to start putting in my Russell 2 values. And again, you're going to want to look at a Russell 2 sheet that's provided for you by your technical assistance provider. And I am going to put in some random numbers here. So don't think that these are real. So now I'm looking at this. I'm like, well, I've got my four years of corn, and I wanted to have 6 years of hay. So I wanted a full 10-year rotation. I'm counting my hay. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've got this extra hay one here. If that's the case, you've accidentally entered a new one in there that you didn't want, just press this little X button here. You can take out any of them at any point in here, but just be aware that if you get rid of a year of corn silage with cover crop somewhere, that your Russell 2 values might not line up the way that they should. So just be careful about what you're deleting where, and that each year makes sense. So for this example, we've got our 10-year rotation. I'm going to choose my current year in rotation. And for this one, right, it's numbered all of them. I'm going to say that it's new. It's my first year going from corn silage into hay. And I'm going to add my average of all of these above. I'm not going to spend the time to like go in my calculator and type them all up and split them over 10. I'm just going to put in a random number here, but that's what you would have to do. goCrop does not average these for you. You're going to need to do that in a spreadsheet or on a calculator yourself. So now that I've done that, I'm going to go back to my list, right? And so I've got a bunch of them that are complete. And you know, my new field has the same soil type. It has the same Russell 2 values, but it's just a different place in the rotation. So what I want to do now is I'm going to copy my new field rotation to my newer field. And to do that, I'm going to click on my newer field, the thing I'm copying to. I'm going to click copy. And now I have this option. It says, all right, I've got my newer field. That's what I'm copying to. It says to right here. From my plan, this plan. And from the field, it's going to be my new field. And I'm going to copy that now. So this is a new feature in goCrop that can be really helpful. If for some reason you're updating your rotations and they're all different, but a bunch of your fields are the same, you can create it once and apply it to different fields as you need to. So now that I've done that, right, I'm going to uncheck newer field and I'm going to look at my newer field and I can see that it's copied it over there. But this isn't for this field, it's not my first year in hay, it's actually my first year in corn silage. So I'm going to switch my year in rotation, but everything else is going to stay the same. I'm not changing any of my annual soil loss because that's what my technical assistance provider gave me, and this all makes sense, and my rotation average hasn't changed either. If any of this does change, you can, like, maybe it's going to be a 9-year rotation and you're taking out the last year of hay, you can update your rotation average soil loss accordingly. So I'm going to move on from this. I'm going to click save. And now I'm going to go to my next step crops. I'm going to skip going to the list because I know I'm all good there, and I'm just going to click on my next step crops. So here now I have this option of I can copy over all of my crops from previous years if I want to, or I can copy over just perennial and overwintered crops. If everything has been the exact same from last year, or pretty close to it, you might want to say all crops. If you just do perennial and overwintered crops, it's pretty much just going to copy over your crops that are, you know, perennial forages, which are like your hay and your pasture. But you might also have fields that are continuous corn. If you do have continuous corn fields and you want to copy those crops over too, we're going to click all crops. And then we're going to choose from our plan, our 2023 plan. And we also have the option to not copy the crops. I think that's one of the new features that's really awesome. So I'm going to do that. But if you don't want to copy your crops, you just want to start from scratch, you're going to see all your fields and add and copy or update crops yourself. I'm going to copy my crops and see what happens from there, what I had, right? Because remember, I planned from 2023, but I'm making something from 2026, but I just want a baseline to start with. I'm copying my crops and take a moment here. And now these buttons pop up that we've seen before, and I'm just going to review my planned crops for all fields. Now, I remember that I made some crop rotations here, and I don't think any of these match, right? So my backfield says pasture, but back in, right, so I open this up, it says pasture here, but I'm pretty sure that's not what I said I was going to do this year, right? That's corn silage with cover crop. So if this is a situation that you have, what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to open up your crop detail information here on the right, and we're going to trash it. It doesn't belong here anymore. It just impacts this year, right? It's just deleting this plan crop from the 2026 plan, just this field, but we don't need it. So now that I don't have any crops here, this crop form saves. And I remember that what I was going to plant was corn silage, which is an annual plant. I'm going to choose corn silage here for my drop down. You can scroll down and see all your options. Notice you don't have a corn silage with cover crop option here. That's because of what's useful to see when we're creating Russells in our crop rotations. But you don't need that here specified in the dropdown because you have an opportunity to do that below. We'll get to that. Then we need to enter a surface cover. If you're curious about what that might be, we have this little help text for corn silage or corn grain. Recommend about 15%. There's no legume there. And then we can indicate some cultural practices. For corn silage, you might be using no-till, or you might be growing it with a cover crop. The rest of these, grown with nurse crop, that's when you're reseeding hay, vining, or mulch a living row cover. This is really for vegetable production. So for something like corn silage, it's going to be mainly no-till and grown with cover crop. And then there's the other options too, where you can indicate if this crop is a cover crop, if it will not be harvested or grazed. We'll be planting this crop over winter from the previous year, or planting of this crop will overwinter into next year. In general, this is not something that you're going to click mostly unless you're doing some sort of grain production. And this is designed to help goCrop know where to place your crop and how to handle it in time. But in general, I don't see this clicked too much, but if you have questions about this, please reach out. So I'm going to click save here. Now we'll follow this thread a little bit more. My corn silage is incomplete. My corn silage has an error, and all of this is because I haven't put in a yield plan yet. So I'm going to add my yield plan, my total anticipated yield. Now, this is something that you're going to need to think about a little bit in terms of, what can your field actually produce, right? And so I work with some folks and they're like, yep, every year, pretty steady, 25 tons per acre. Great, we're going to go with that. They've got the records to back that up. Some folks, they say, I'm getting 18 tons per acre. And I look at the fertility of like how much they've been applying for manure or other fertilizers. And the question I have then is, well, if you applied more fertilizer, could the soil produce more, right? Is it because the crop's not getting what it needs? And sometimes folks will say yes. And then we'll say, okay, well, this is what could be grown if fertilized appropriately. Then there's some folks that I work with. I'm like, well, it's 18 tons per acre. Like, is that really what it gets? And they're like, yeah, like that soil type just can't produce more than that, no matter how much it's fertilized. So check with your soil series fact sheet. Think about like what the average is. Like you might have a really good year where it's 30 tons per acre, but typically gets 25. You're going to want to keep it at 25. Our number of harvests we can leave blank because it's only one. I know that we are running up at noon, and I think that I can hopefully finish this up in the next 20 minutes. Sorry, it's taken me some time, but there's a lot of nuance going through this. So if you need to leave, feel free to leave. If and the rest of this tutorial will be posted online, so you can reference it back to it and see whatever you might have missed. But what we'll be going over the next 20 minutes is the rest of crops, a little bit of nutrient balancing. We already talked about records, so we did that. I also want to check in on reports, and there's one little thing in farm assets I want to look at or show you. In general, don't worry about farm assets too much, but there is a couple of things that could be of interest. But that's what we'll hopefully accomplish in the next 20-25 minutes. All right, so now that I've entered in my harvest plan, I now have corn silage recommendations that are generating, and my corn silage says it's complete. Now, the thing that I want to say here is that you can override these. I can click this and a form will pop up and I can enter in different values. In general, I would say I would stray away from that. If you see this notation, it's going to change from book values to complete. That means that they've been manually changed. It's optimal to use book values because then every time you change your soil test or your crop, goCrop will automatically update your recommendations based off of what you have chosen. And that's what I want for my plan. I hope that's what you want for your plan. And so in order to change my recommendations from complete back to book values, I'll open up that form and then I'm just going to trash it. And that's going to prompt goCrop to automatically regenerate those recommendations. And every time we delete something, we get this little pop-up that says, are you sure? And I'm going to say, yep, I'm going to delete it. If I didn't want to, I could click not now. And this add crop form pops up. That's a little bit of a bug. We don't need that. I'm just going to click go back. And now we can see that my corn silage recommendations has book values. My corn silage removal has book values. And those are the things I want to see here. So I added my crop to my backfield. It matches my crop rotation. I'm going to risk management. And I'm saying it doesn't have living vegetation in April. Or I did say I was planting it with cover crop, so it does. So I'm going to click save. I'm going to go through adding crops really rapidly in the next couple of minutes. And I think, I'm doing that partially in the interest of time, but also hopefully to show you that once you get really comfortable with goCrop, it can be really fast. And this is what I would do if I was working with someone and we were just trying to bust through it, right? So I'm in my backfield. My front field, I can't remember what I said in my rotation. I'm going to click there. Oh, it is hay. This matches. I'm going to double check. Yep, I'm doing hay. It's established, but I actually harvest it 4 times. This is really important because the amount of harvest you enter does impact nitrogen application or nitrogen recommendation. But I also see that I've got my book values there. That looks good. But maybe my legume content was not entered correctly. If you're thinking about what you have for legume content, don't sweat about between like 15% and 20%. The legume content really feeds into nitrogen recommendations, and the cutoffs are 0 to 30, 30 to 60, and 60 and above 60. So if you're like, oh, I don't know if my legume content is 45 or 50, that's not going to have a big difference. But if you're like, oh, my legume content is 25 or 35, that can kind of change what your content might be. But for me in this example, I know I said I was going to change it, but I'm actually just going to leave it at 20. And then I'm going to check with my risk management. Do I have living vegetation April? I said it's hay, so yes. I'm going to save it. And I'm going to come back to crop. I'm moving on from my front field to my hill pasture, which it's pasture, right? I named it pasture. My crop rotation says it's pasture. My risk management, need to update my living vegetation because my pasture is there in April. Soaking up those nutrients and that moisture. Coming back to crops, I'm going to double check that, oh, but in this example, my pasture from the last few years, legume content has really dwindled. So it's more something like 50%. And if I ever did reseed it, I probably wouldn't grow with nurse crops. So I'm just going to leave that blank. So my book values are ready to go. That's great. All right, my new field, right? This was one that I had in rotation. And I said for my first rotation, it was going to be a new seeding of hay. I have asparagus here. That's not what I want. I'm going to open that. I'm going to get rid of it by hitting the trash button. And I'm going to add my crop. It's perennial. It is hay new, a legume new. Find that. I think it's just hay. Our surface cover is going to be 85. Our legume content is going to be low in this example. We're going to grow it with a nurse crop. And then this is important when we have hay, if it's being reseeded this year. And we are. This is our first year in our hay crop. So we're going to click save. And we're going to check out our risk management. Let's say I'm planted that in the fall. So my vegetation is there this spring. If you were planting it this spring, I would say that we would click no for that. All right, we're in our first year of our legume seeding. We've added that it's reseeded this year, and now we're going to add our harvest plan. And it might be a little bit lower than typical because it's reseeded. You might have a situation where you have a hay field that you harvest and graze. You can see that in our harvest plan, there is an option to add grazes if you'd like. And then for our newer field, I think what we said for that in our crop rotation is that it's its first year in corn. So I'm going to add that crop, and it's going to be annual. We've got our corn silage, 15 for surface cover, 0 for legume content. And we're going to say we're going to grow it with a cover crop. But then we're going to add our harvest plan, and we'll say about 20 tons here. We'll save that. But maybe this is one of those situations where, although it's our first year in corn silage, we're also going to take a first cut of hay. And so to let goCrop know that's going to happen, we're going to add a crop. We're going to choose its perennial. We're going to choose our hay. And then, of course, all our other information here. But then for our harvest or yield plan, we're just going to put what we plan on getting for first cut. We're going to go back to our risk management. And so we've already got our living vegetation in April. So now we're finished up with our crops. We're going to go to nutrient balancing. And we're going to start with our back field, which is corn silage. And when we come into this, we see a lot. There's a lot going on here. We've got our nutrient balance table. So we've got up top our label of our columns, the nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, or lime, what's recommended based off of your soil text, the crop removal based off of book value. So what crop you chose, how much it's going to yield, any past years that might apply. This would be either from plow down or any manure applications that happened in 2025 or 2024. And then we have our planned manure applications. We already have a plan here because remember when we were in settings, we said, I want to copy over what I did previously to see what that looked like. And that's why those are automatically populated here. We have a row for fertilizers. We don't have anything planned there. And we have our total credits, which is the addition of past year's manure and fertilizer. And then we have our balance. We've got a little help text here. But this balance is in relationship to what's recommended. So it's total credits minus what's recommended. And then we have a balance removal. And this is the total credits minus crop removal. If there's a negative, that means that the amount applied exceeds recommended or the amount applied exceeds crop removal. If it's in black, it means that's how much more demand for that nutrient your crop has. Now, in my screen setup, you can see I've got my nutrient table and then a list of different components of that table. Depending on what your screen looks like, all of this could be below. One thing I didn't touch on, but could be helpful if you have a smaller screen and you want to see this side by side like I have, is that there are these little collapse buttons. So you can click on the left here to close it, this little green sidebar menu, or you can expand it by clicking the little carroty thing. And then the same thing for your checklist steps. There's like this little bar here. If you hover, it gets on one of those other little carrots or arrows, and you can hide the sidebar. There's a menu that we can collapse and the sidebar that we can collapse. I'm going to keep mine up because I think it's kind of helpful in this, but just to let you know that that exists. If you don't see this in yours, it could be below and you can scroll down. We also have these nutrient risks and indices. You're probably familiar with this, but basically you got your nitrogen leaching index. You put that in risk management, I believe, or it was entered in risk management. Your soil phosphorus, that comes from your soil test, so from your record. And then your Vermont P index is based off of a bunch of different information that was entered. You can see like I'm hovering my mouse over these rows and then nothing highlights until I click, until I hit the Vermont P index, and that means I can click it and open it up. So I'm going to open it up and I can see what information is feeding into that. If my soil test isn't entered, then I'll see like an error here, and that's okay. You can click it and it will tell you what it's missing. I don't have an example of that, but if you see it can't calculate, it will tell you why it can't calculate what's needed there. So similar to this, I can hover on any of these rows and it'll tell me the information, or it'll filter by the information that I'm looking that's associated with it, right? So I haven't clicked on any of this, so everything's there. My recommendations, removal, any credits, applied manure. And then I can say, well, I just want to know what's included, what's associated with my recommended amount. And that's, my crop details. I can look at my crop removal. So crop recommended, my corn silage recommendations based off of the information I put here. If I click crop removal, it'll show me my crop removal recommendations based off of my crop details. You notice that when I unclick the row or click back on the row I had filtered for, it shows me everything again. Past years, I don't have any past years credits. If I had applied any summer applications, that would show up here, or anything in the 2024. And then we have this manure application, and this came from my 2025 record. So in this, I don't have a lot of wiggle room to add more phosphorus if I don't want to exceed my recommendations. So I'm going to add a planned fertilizer application of nitrogen to help me meet my balance or my crop needs. So to do that, I clicked on the fertilizer row. I don't have to do that. If I unclick on my fertilizer row, I'll see everything. But what I really want to look at here is planned fertilizer application here. I'm going to click add. And then it's a plan, so there's not a hard date here. It's a general date. And you'll choose either early, mid, or late of the month you want to apply it in. For me, it might be side dress, so I'm looking at mid-June for my corn. So then what gets tricky here is that all of my fertilizers that I've ever used show up here. So you want to make sure that you're using the right one. So I have two ureas. I want to use one of them and not the other. So I'm going to discard this to make sure I'm using the correct one by going back to my nutrient sources, looking at my urea and saying, oh, this is urea dry. I'm going to save that. And now when I go back to my nutrient balancing, going back to my field, I'm going to apply my fertilizer application, again, mid-June. And now when I scroll down here, I say, okay, urea dry, that's absolutely the right fertilizer I want to use. That's great. We'll click that. And then I'm going to maybe go back and forth until I figure out what rate is going to help me meet that nutrient deficit that I have right now. So I chose my fertilizer, I'm trying to rate out the top dress, I'm choosing what makes the most sense from each one of these application types, drop down options, incorporation method, right? I'm choosing not incorporated, but just like we saw with manure application, if I choose any of the others, then you just have that option to choose others. But we'll save this. And now I was really close. I don't know if I could realistically tweak my fertilizer application past 150 pounds per acre to hit my nitrogen recommendation right on the nose, right? Like what's recommended is 120, given my manure and my fertilizer application. I have a total credit of 112, and so I have a balance of 7.3. I could go back and forth and be like, well, maybe if I increase my urea application to 160, that's going to balance this out completely. But is that realistic? Would you really set your rate to 150 or change it for each field? Or would you probably either do 150 or 200? If we do 200, you got to think about like what increments are most realistic for actual application. We're too far over our nitrogen recommendation to meet to be in line of the standards. So I'm going to click back on my fertilizer to filter for that. I'm going to change it back to 150, right? I'm clicking on that row to start editing it. It brings up the form. I edit, I save it. I'm not going to go through all of these nutrient balancing pieces, but the one that I do want to talk about, I'm going back to crops to make sure I got the right one, is this newer field. Because I have a hay crop that's going into corn. So I'm going to click this. And again, we see the same setup. I had already filtered for fertilizer, so I'm not seeing everything that is associated with this. I'm going to unclick this. And now I can see that I've got hay recommendations and corn silage recommendations. I don't have anything for past years, any manure records for this, any fertilizer, or any total credits. So what's key here is that because this is rotating from hay to corn, we actually are going to have a past year's credit because over time, over 2026, your hay crop is going to, even though you're taking a first cut, it's going to start to can you all still hear me? Because I just got a connection that my internet is out.
What'd you just say?
Okay, great. Thank you. I just got a notification that my internet went out, so I was checking that you all could hear me before I talked for 2 minutes and no one knew what I was saying. So excellent. Thank you, Susan. So what I want to show here is that we're going to add a credit because it's plowed down. Or not, maybe you're no-tilling in, but it's still going to decompose over time, releasing nitrogen, and that's what we want to capture. So to do that, we can leave this all up, or we can filter by past years. We're going to add our credits. I know it says 2025, and I know it's going down in 2026, but it's really that's going to release in 2026 that we're going to keep it in this credits from year. We have a terminated crop, and we're going to use plans and records, and we're going to click that for the drop-down menu. And then we're going to choose what makes the most sense. So if it was a alfalfa or legume crop, you're going to want to choose either of these options. And if it had less than 30% legume or alfalfa, or soybeans or peas, you would choose those options. Typically, the most that I see folks that I work with use is going to be grass low or grass high. Low really is like low, like 2 tons per acre. So typically it's grass high yield. And this lets you know how much nitrogen is credited from that crop being just decomposed and mineralizing over time. And it just attributes 70 pounds in the first year and 30 pounds in the second year. I'm not gonna, if you were here and it's a newer field, you can add a record, which is the best thing to do. But if you're not able to do that for whatever reason, you just have an estimation, you can add that here in credits from manure, where you put total manure applied. And then you would also need to look at the manure test to put the average organic nitrogen of manure applied there. Typically, we don't use this because we'll enter it as a record. So I'm going to save this. And it doesn't love the fact that I opened up this and chose liquid slurry. I didn't see that I had done that. You saw that the reason why I'm going back in here is I see that it's incomplete. It says it can't calculate it. And it's because I accidentally clicked manure applied liquid slurry. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to go back to use plans and records and click save. Now it can calculate that, and it's saying this year there's going to be about 70 pounds of nitrogen credited from my crop. I still want to apply some manure before I plant my corn. So I'm going to, or maybe before first cut. So I'm going to add a planned manure application. And to do that, I can either click on this row to filter for those options, or I can unclick the row I clicked to see all my options, which gets to be a little bit of a lot. So I'm going to go back to my manure application and planned manure application. I'm going to add that. So for this, I'm going to say I'm going to plant before first cut. That's going to be maybe early May. And I'm going to apply from my manure pit, which is my big pit. Remember, it'll show both that I've ever had, or all that I've ever had for manure sources, but I'm going to choose the one that's associated with this plan. And then I'm going to choose my rate. So, I'm going to try to put maybe more like 4,000 gallons on there. And then our incorporation method. And with manure, it does matter how it's incorporated for the amount of nitrogen that is available to the plant. Not so much for fertilizer, right? You can choose whatever application method for fertilizer that doesn't impact so much the nitrogen availability, because it's considered to be pretty full. But for here, us, it's hay, so we're going to do not incorporated and click save. Now I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, okay, I'm putting about 26 pounds of nitrogen for my first year's crop with 4,000 gallons. But this is my last cut, and I want to up it a little bit. So it looks like I have that wiggle room. So what I'm looking at here to make that decision is that I'm looking at my total credits and my balance is 85 for nitrogen. But remember that our recommendation is both for our first cut of hay and for our corn silage. So we don't want to put potentially 20,000 gallons of manure before we do our first cut, because not all that nitrogen is going to be available later to our corn. So we might want to have some split applications to get the most agronomic value out of whatever fertilizer applications we have. I'm going to go ahead and plan for a little starter in my corn. And again, I'm filtering by pressing this fertilizer button and clicking add. And I'm going to choose a plan date for, let's say, go with late May on this one. And I actually didn't include starter, I don't think, so I'm just going to go with urea as my starter, and then put in my rate. Inject it. So now I have this balance that's, about that. Okay, so we've got our recommendation, we got our past years from our plow down, we have my planned manure application before first cut, and then my starter fertilizer. And we could bump this up so that we could kind of max it out if we wanted to, or zero it out. But I'm going to leave it as it is for now. I think the other plug I would make right now is that if you do have corn and you want to side dress later, get a pre-side dress nitrate test, and that'll let you know how much nitrate or nitrogen is needed to help that crop get through the rest of the season. The pre-side dress nitrate test, the PSNT test, is normally taken when the corn's about knee-high-ish, like, and it's taken as close to when you expect the side dress as possible. So there's a lot of nuance that goes into this, a lot to watch between how much your balance can go over recommendations versus crop removal. So my encouragement to any farmer who's looking at this, or to any technical assistance provider who, like, this still seems like there's a lot of nuance, a lot of in and out to it, reach out to somebody who has a little bit more experience or expertise to kind of help walk through this. I'm not going to get into all of that today, and like how to balance against the nutrient recommendations versus crop removal and how the P index ties into that. There's just so many case by case scenarios that it's really, I'd be happy to either work with you or connect you with someone to work with to make sure that your nutrient balance per field meets the standards. So when you get to this point and you're starting to mess with or add planned manure and planned fertilizer applications, connect with a technical assistance provider. The one other thing that I do want to connect on, I didn't touch on in the nutrient balance here, is if we go to manure, we have these options of planned manure application or planned grazing, or planned applications from grazing. Don't use the grazing. You don't have to, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The state does not require you to track it. And I think more importantly is that if you're grazing a field, chances are you've marked it as pasture. And in the pasture recommendation, the nitrogen recommendation is lower because it's assuming that the manure is being applied from your cows while they're there. So it's already accounted for that manure deposition. If you have any questions specifically about this, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help, but in general, don't worry too much about the planned grazing manure option. If you are feeling, I think one of the other things that's really helpful is that as you're going through, especially nutrient balancing, you can click the done balancing button up here. And that can be really helpful if you've got a lot of manure or not enough manure and you want to really strategically allot manure to different fields. The done balancing can be a really nice way of saying, this is what I plan to do on this field, and I want to stick with that. Whereas other fields, you might feel like you have a little bit more wiggle room, and you might leave those as not done balancing because you want to come back and look at those. So when I come back to my list here by pressing the list icon, I can see which fields are in progress, which aren't started, and what are new this year. I'm going to move on from this. I know there's a lot more to dive into that, but I think it's really on a case-by-case basis, so feel free to reach out if you have questions. But what I want to do is we can go on to what's next here, which is our next step. And, letting us know we got to do records. We can go to see our plan reports from here, but I'm not going to do that quite yet. You can access plan reports from what's next, but I'm going to go back to the dashboard because I want you to see that now we've got all these checked off and our nutrient balancing is in progress because we haven't said done review. Just a quick note on that is that this checklist here will only have a green mark if you've checked done reviewed on all of them, that they are complete. Otherwise, it'll always stay in progress. And that's because unlike the other pieces, goCrop doesn't know when you're really done, completely filled in or not. So you have to tell it to do that. And you do that by pressing the done balancing button here. So that's not checked off. Don't worry about it. There's a way to do it, but you don't have to do it either. But let's go on to reports, right? So we're at the landing page for our 2026 plan. We're on our dashboard. We're going to click on reports. Now we can see a list of our individual farm reports, what's required in the Vermont NMP, and then we have what right now says unknown. I'm going to refresh the status because what ideally is happening here is if it tells me if my report is complete or not. And So in this page, we've got our individual farm reports, kind of went out the outline of this. And we also have our individual field plan reports and then our field record log. And this field record log is for 2025, and we don't have it, or sorry, for 2026, we don't have any records for that. If you wanted to go back to your 2025 records, you would have, or get a 2025 record plan, you'd need to create a plan and go to the plan year and access the 2025 records from there. But in your 2026 plan, these are your 2026 records that aren't there because you haven't entered any because it's only January 2026. But if you want to generate a full report that's required for your plan, you'll click generate, and that'll include all of your individual farm reports that are labeled Vermont NMP. We have 3 optional ones that you can always generate on their own, and our generate will also include, like I just said, the individual farm reports, but also your individual field reports. These are your field reports as planned. And the other option here is that you can customize. So if you only wanted a few of them in one PDF, you can choose what those are. It shows you here what's already in the automatically generated combined report and the first page I just showed you by what's all checked. But let's say that I only wanted my P-index and farm nutrient balance and soil test summary. What I would do is I could go through and uncheck all of these, or I could click this, the top button to check them all, and then uncheck them. And then there's just choose the ones that I wanted. I would still want to uncheck my field plans if I didn't want any of those. And then I would click generate custom. I'm going to go back to use the default, which brings me to this page, and the other way that you can generate a report is just by clicking each report individually. And now I can just see my narrative of what I've entered there. I can download it, I can open up the PDF from these buttons, I can also download it over here on the right, or I can print on the right. So I showed you all the other ways to download reports, but not the generate default one, just kind of wanting to show you all the other ways. So the last thing that you remember is the one that's most used often, and that's just clicking this generate button. So now I've been able to generate my entire plan with my narrative, my manure sources, my manure drawdown, so on and so forth, all the way through all of my field plan applications for each of my fields. There's a lot to look at here that your technical assistant provider, maybe you would look at to help verify that it meets all the state standards. One of them is the manure drawdown. Your applications of your plan applications should be within 10% of your manure drawdown. If you're not quite there, or you have some questions about how to make that happen, please reach out to your technical assistance provider and we can help work with you on that. But this is one of the reports that's important to look at that you can't see anywhere else in goCrop to make sure that your plan meets the standards. Okay, so we went over report sum, and now the last thing I'll do is go over farm assets. And I'm not going to spend a bunch of time here because in general, if you're updating your plan, you're going to enter your records, your manure application records, and your soil tests. Then you're going to planning and you're going to update. But just in case this comes up and you are thinking about it this year, we're going to go into farm assets. And what farm assets are, what it's telling you they are when you first enter. It's showing you all your fields, all your manure sources, all your fertilizers, and all your spreaders throughout all your plan years. Everything's here that you can see. But what I want to look at is just the fields. And so I'm going to filter out my other assets by getting rid of those. So all I see are my fields. Then if I click on my field, what I see here is my new sidebar menu that has all my fields that I can toggle through. But then I have these 3 sub tabs, which are my farm details, which you're familiar with. We just looked at these. What our plan is another way to look at your plan. But again, don't do your plan here. Come to your planning section to work on that. It's going to help make this a little bit easier than working in farm assets, because then you're not because then you can go through all the steps sequentially and have all those other walkthrough help shortcuts. The thing also to keep in mind is that up here, you can toggle between your farm assets and your fields between your different plans. So that's an option too. But why I also wanted to take you here is because this is another way that you can look at your records. You can enter your records by field here, because it'll default to the field location that I'm in, right? I'm in my backfield, I add my new record, you know, and I can keep doing that for all the records that I want to apply for, add to this field. But I would still say like this is one way to access that, but the records button is also tried and true way of also doing that. But the other thing that's really helpful about the farm assets that isn't seen in other places in goCrop is that you can see that I'm in my backfield, I'm in my records, I have this little toggle here, and I can see all my records as a list, but I can switch it so that I can also see it by a balance. So this is really helpful if you've made your plan and then for whatever reason, maybe your first application of manure you applied over what you planned or under, you can see your balance up to date, right? So for this field in my backfield, I can see my balance in 2026 has this past year 2025 application that's credited to it, which is similar for my front field, but my hill pasture and new pasture and newer fields don't have that. But this balance is based off of records. And I think it's really important to say that when you're in planning, you're planning for the following year. Your records are based off of what you actually did. So make sure that when you are thinking of, when you're either making a planned manure application or adding a record, that you are in the right place when you're doing that. And one way to think about that is if you're in a plan, right, you're going to have that date range. It's something you're planning on doing, you don't know the exact date. But if you're entering a record, that's going to have a very specific singular date that's associated with it, something that's already done. So I think I've gone over planning, records, and a little bit of farm assets I wanted to check on. So I keep recording, Susan, for just a little bit longer. I'm going to share my screen just to give that contact information one more time. And great, so hopefully you can see my contact information now. And like I said a lot throughout this tutorial, that there are some nuances that I didn't get to and might be case specific. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions related to goCrop or you see any bugs or just nutrient management planning in general. That was a lot. I know I went a half hour over again. I'm sorry about that. And Susan, I think you can stop recording now and we can take questions if there are any.